All right, welcome everyone. It is Thursday, November 30th, 2023, and this meeting of the MAPC Advanced Plans Committee is called to order. Roll call. Deborah Foster is here. Chuck Warren.
Here.
Joe Johnson.
I'm here.
Yes, you are. Hugh Nix is absent. Cindy Miles is absent. John McKay and Tony Zimmelman is here. All right, we have a quorum of 5 and we will proceed. First item on the agenda is review and approval of the previous meeting summary from November 9th.
I move for approval.
Kirk Sponsel, Deputy County Councilor. I apologize. Just to jump in real quick, I would request that the prior minutes reflect Kirk as K-I-R-K, not K-U-R-K.
I'd make that friendly amendment.
Thank you.
All right. Do we have,
Second.
okay, we have a motion from Mr. Johnson and a second from Mr. Warren
I'll be abstaining because I wasn't here.
And one abstention from Mr. McKay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. I have 4-0-1, I believe, is the vote on that. All right, second item on the agenda is a special meeting schedule discussion. I don't know how long this needs to go. We had talked about it at our last meeting. I wanted to talk about it in addition with some of the people who weren't there the last time. We talked about the possibility of switching our advanced plan meetings to the alternate Thursdays from the MAPC meeting, so we didn't have 2 meetings in one day. The consensus of opinion seems to be to leave it the way it is. Does anybody want to speak up and discuss this item anymore, or are we just going to accept that? Oops.
I think we're just a little ahead of ourselves on this one. No problem. This one is a little bit less intense, specifically detailing with the special meeting schedule. Considering we have been meeting on Thursdays, this is just to announce those dates publicly.
I'm sorry. I truly am not mentally focused today. All right. This is the special meeting schedule. When we do 2 meetings per month instead of 1 meeting a month, the chair of advanced plans needs to officially call a second meeting. So given that these 2 pending ones in January and February are waiting for an MAPC calendar approval, should I just do the December 28th one? All right, I officially call for a special meeting of Advanced Plans Committee on December 28th, 2023, 3 days after Christmas. You've all been warned. Let the minutes or meeting summary show that Cindy has just arrived. So we will do a special meeting of advanced plans on December 28th and probably 2 more in January and February, but we'll discuss those later. Good. Thank you. All right. Item 4 on the agenda, solar energy conversion system open house results. Can I ask how many of us on the committee managed to go to the open house? All right, 3, that's good. Excellent. I saw a couple of you there. All right, go ahead, please.
I guess I just need to lean in. Excuse me. Good morning, all. Justin Constantino, Principal Planner. Just before I dive into the results of the meeting, just a quick recap on kind of where we're at. On September 13th, the Sedgwick County Board of Commissioners approved a moratorium for solar energy zoning applications, which remains in effect until March 20th, 2024. During the moratorium, the Planning Department and the Planning Commission are directed to review the applicable existing zoning code provisions and bring forward any proposed zoning code and or comprehensive plan amendments. So that's kind of what led us into the meeting on November 16th. Overall, I would say the meeting was a great success. The planning department hosted the event from 4:30 to 7:30 p.m. at the Sedgwick County Extension Office. We had 78 individuals sign into the event. Approximately 12 staff members were in attendance. So I would say the room was probably well over 100 individuals. Staff set up 13 stations, each station representing a different topic as it pertains to large scale utility solar systems, ranging from items such as glare to environmental impact to fire hazards. From 4:30 p.m. to 6 o'clock p.m., attendees were encouraged to visit each station, chat with staff, and place a Post-it note on the comments on those boards for each individual topic. Staff also had a standard comment cards available at the sign-in table and throughout the venue, as well as cards containing a QR code that directed stakeholders to an online survey. At 6 o'clock p.m., staff gave a brief 30-minute presentation on the existing conditions and regulations pertaining to large-scale utility solar. Following the presentation, individuals wishing to speak were each given 3 minutes to discuss their thoughts on large-scale utility solar. The biggest takeaway was that the majority of speakers that did speak at that event were generally in favor of large-scale utility solar, while the Post-it notes and some of the comment cards generally tended to ask more questions about the technology, how it would impact them. There were several Post-its that were outright opposed to solar energy near their homes specifically. A lot of those were coming from the Mays-Colwich area. Independent of that staff event, we have received letters from individuals, stakeholders. We've received letters from the Kansas Power Alliance in favor of keeping the existing regulations, and the Public Service Company of Oklahoma and Strategic Economic Research Companies. We received letters from them in support of the Chisholm Trail Solar Project specifically. Staff is still compiling results from that meeting, from the survey specifically, and will add those findings to the already robust town hall report that is included in your packets this morning. Final results will be shared with all of you in the very near future. That concludes my report, general background on the event itself. I know, as Chairperson Foster mentioned, several of you were in attendance. If you'd like to discuss that, you're more than welcome to now, and I'm also available for any questions that you may have.
Are there any questions for Justin? All right, thank you, Justin. I thought it went very well too. I was sitting in the front row with some pro-solar people to my left and some people from Colwich who were anti to my right. So I was eavesdropping on both sides of the conversation. It was civil and it was interesting. And I think the attendance was amazing. So good.
Yeah, great turnout, very civil. Like I said, I would say the event was a success. It was interesting going through those Post-it notes, just looking at some of the handwriting and some of the groupings. You could tell where people were hanging out and what people were discussing. So very interesting gathering that information.
All right, thank you.
Sure.
All right, next item on the agenda is the event permits in the county, and I think Justin's going to handle that one too. By the way, I've been informed that we don't have to vote on receive and file agenda items. We simply receive them and file them. Am I correct? From our attorneys? Yep. All right, so we won't be voting on these receive and file items from now on. All right, Justin, you're up.
I'm glad you brought that up. This is another receive and file item dealing specifically with event permits in the county. If you did peek ahead to your agenda, you'll notice that we have event centers in the county next. So it's sort of a 1A, 1B, although we are splitting these topics up separately. Just to give you a little bit of background, on November 14th, the Sedgwick County Board of Commissioners held a staff meeting and received a staff presentation on event centers in the county and short-term rentals specifically. This presentation and discussion highlighted complaints that were received regarding noise, trash disposal, traffic, and other impacts from these events that have been occurring in the county. Commissioners expressed interest in learning more about the state of practice, basically the policies and regulations that come with that for both event centers and event permitting. Staff conducted research on the state of practice of event permitting in 5 counties. So we had a staff member reach out via phone, via email, and then did some research of their regulations to determine what policies they had in place, if any. Staff did survey 5 counties, and those counties were chosen due to their similarities with Sedgwick County and due to their size and similar urban-rural interface. The counties represented in the survey include Douglas County, Butler County, Johnson County, Wyandotte County, and Riley County. Of all the 5 all the 5 counties that were surveyed, 4 had detailed performance standards and permitting processes for allowing special events. Only 1, Butler County, does not have any detailed performance standards. The performance standards have similar criteria in all the counties, including noise, parking, all of those issues that people were generally concerned about at the Board of County Commissioners. Those standards are addressed in terms of lighting, location of site, health and sanitation, those types of concerns. All the counties followed an administrative review process by the staff to permit these events. Special review by the Board of County Commissioners is only required for larger events. Our next step is basically to take this information to the Board of County Commissioners at some point in December. But before we do that, we certainly welcome any feedback or discussion that you're willing to provide based on those findings. I did provide kind of a brief overview of those findings in my presentation, but in your packet, there's a greater basically list of things that we found. So I'm open to any questions and happy to engage in any discussion. Yes, sir.
I have a question. Is the cities have like the areas of influence where they determine it and the county overrides it, or does the city override it? I'm thinking about all the little cities that are around Wichita.
So in instances where there would be a zoning action in terms of a conditional use or a zoning change, if that property is located within an area of influence for one of the cities, then that city has an opportunity to indicate to planning staff that they want to have their planning commission consider it. So then it would go to that city's planning commission. They would make a recommendation, and that recommendation would be carried forward to the BOCC. It would also come to you all at the MAPC if that meeting occurs with enough time for us to get that to you. When it goes to the BOCC, it is advisory only. It does not influence the vote. But it's a formal process that allows those cities' planning commissions to have input in a recommendation.
If it's within the city limits of one of these small towns, does the city still take the preference and it's not applicable to them? I said when you're inside the city limits of, I want to say Park City, for example, they have the final say about this, or does the county?
If it's inside the city, corporate city limits of a jurisdiction, then it's up to their zoning code that would apply. Now, Philip has informed me I stand corrected though. If it is in an area of influence and the small cities planning commission recommends denial, then it does change to vote and takes a 4 out of 5 vote at the planning commission. So, sorry, county commission. Couple of things that I'd point out about this one is that number one is that if a property is 20 acres or larger in the unincorporated county and they want to operate an event center, part of the changes that were made to the zoning code back in 2016, it doesn't take any zoning action. They are allowed to do that by right. If it's less than the 20 acres, we've seen cases recently. I can think of one that's getting ready to go to the BOCC next week. If it's less than 20 acres, then it does require a conditional use. And Justin, it sounds like from our inquiry with other counties that there are a number of counties that are kind of facing a similar question, which is, are event centers in the county, unincorporated county, appropriate? And if so, to what degree and what conditions should be attached to them? So it's been interesting to see what the findings are from those other communities.
Okay, and any other?
Justin, did you find anything as looking over the other counties' regulations that stood out as being a really good or something that we need to take extra notice of?
I don't know if there was anything that specifically stood out. I would say that the majority of things that all the counties were looking to address were to mitigate noise, trash, lighting, the standard row of complaints that we're typically used to hearing. I don't think there was anything specific within their regulations where one county was regulating something that other counties hadn't thought of. So I don't think there were any really unique variables there.
If I could, one thing that I would highlight is that Sedgwick County does not have a noise ordinance. There was, I believe Douglas County referred to their noise ordinance, and that has been an ongoing dialogue and question for the county commission is whether or not a noise ordinance would be appropriate.
Okay, any other questions for Justin on this? Can I ask for a clarification from staff? We had talked about not needing motions to receive and file, but should I do public comment on each agenda item or just wait until the end on all these receive and file? Ask for it or not?
For response to Deputy County Counselor, I think it's ultimately the deference. It's ultimately up to your determination. Scott, before I go further.
Yeah, what I would offer is that if you do solicit for comments now, it might, if you receive information that is helpful, it could spur another dialogue among the commission members. So in that way, it may be helpful. But if you would, depending on if you'd rather, kind of streamline the meeting, you could save it till the end.
All right, well, I would kind of like to at least ask the members of the public who are sitting back there at the back edge, did you want to comment, any of you, on the solar situation? Nope. Did any of you want to comment on this item? And I'll ask you as each item comes up, and we'll at least consider the possibility of a little discussion. Okay, I think we're done with this item. Are we not? Any more questions, any more comments? And Justin, I think you're up again, so.
Perfect.
Item 5, event permits. No, excuse me, event center in the county. Item 6 on the agenda.
Sure. As I mentioned before, this is kind of the 1B to that. And Scott kind of teed me up nicely on this by mentioning the 20 acres. So just again, a little bit of background. Back in 2016, the Unified Zoning Code was updated to permit event centers in the county in 2 instances. One, by right in the rural residential zoning district if the property is greater than 20 acres, or 2, with the approval of a conditional use if the property is less than 20 acres. So again, Scott, thanks for the background on that. Where we're at with event centers, and I think kind of where this topic differentiates with event permits, is that event centers kind of deals with a physical structure, whereas event permit is kind of a one-off. Obviously, those two things are intertwined a little bit, but as of November 2023, county staff estimates that there are approximately 9 known event centers currently operating in unincorporated Sedgwick County. On November 14th, the County Board of Commissioners held a staff meeting and received a brief presentation on event centers in the county and short-term rentals specifically. The presentation and following discussion highlighted complaints, again, similar to our first item: noise, trash, cars coming in and out, traffic. And commissioners expressed interest in learning more about the state of practice for both event centers and event permitting. So again, we did conduct more research. We reached out to those same counties, those 5 counties, but we did expand our search to 10 in total for event centers in particular. Again, email, phone calls, research on their individual codes. And again, these 10 counties were chosen due to their similarities with Sedgwick County in size and urbanization. So the counties represented include Kingman, Harvey, Butler, Sumner, Reno, Johnson, Douglas, Miami, Wyandotte, and Riley counties. Of the 10 counties surveyed, only 2, Wyandotte County and Riley County, had specific regulations regarding event centers. Wyandotte County requires a special use permit for any event center, including assembly halls, concert halls, dance halls, exhibition halls, and convention centers. Riley County has specific performance standards for rural resort, retreat, or events centers pertaining to size, noise generation, and access. The other counties didn't have any specific regulations, like I mentioned in the unincorporated county region. However, two counties, Butler County and Douglas County, are working towards amending their zoning code in the near future, specifically focusing on event centers. As Scott mentioned before, it's kind of a hot topic right now. So I think there is a little bit of urgency in some of these counties to get some regulations in place. Again, our next step is to take this information to the Board of County Commissioners in December, but we certainly welcome any feedback or discussion that you're willing to provide now.
Yep. Joe? There are two, and if you look at the subject line, there's one that says event permits and one that says event centers. I think there's some up, Scott's coming to the rescue. All right, was it John or Chuck who had? Okay. All right, John.
What action does it take for in the county if you're under the 20 acres and you're having a wedding reception or family get together or something that be permitted or not permitted?
I would say that would probably, oh, go ahead, Kirk.
Kirk Sponsor, Deputy County Councilor. I think these probably need to be analyzed on a case by case basis. There is some discretion with MAPD in finding even if things don't quite fit, finding the closest category for certain events. I think you have to look at whether or not it's commercial in nature and other factors. So I don't think we can necessarily draw a hard line at this juncture.
Scott?
Yeah, one thing that I would add to the conversation too is that agritourism, and if it's agricultural in nature, then there's also an exemption from the zoning code. So yeah, I can think events you can think of that are closely affiliated and because of agriculture, maybe apple harvesting event, or I don't even know if pumpkin patches in some circumstances fall under this category. So that's an interesting dynamic that also happens in the unincorporated county, is you end up with this agricultural element as well.
Does that answer your question? Does eating count? I don't know. I think that's a question for our attorneys to figure out. I think we've got the agricultural element, we've got the whether there's a structure or not, we've got whether it repeats, whether it's commercial or not. I think basically it's just all complicated enough that it is going to be case by case, and I don't know if, yeah. Okay, any other questions for Justin on this topic? Do any members of the public here in chambers want to speak on this topic? Seeing none. All right. Boy, Justin, you're just doing everything today. Airport hazard zoning code update, item 7.
Sure. So this is kind of a quick update on the airport hazard zoning code. Basically, just some background. The airport hazard zoning code limits hazards that endanger the lives and property around Wichita Airport. So the primary purpose of the code is to limit the height of structures around airports based on the assigned hazard zone. The code was first adopted back in 1955 and later amended in 1983 and 1995. In October 2023, the city contracted with Kaufman Associates to draft an updated code, an updated airport height and hazard zoning ordinance. The Kaufman Associates will work with MAPD, MABCD, and airport department staff to review and assess how the current code is implemented with respect to current airport land use compatibility. With input from the Metropolitan Area Planning Commission, City of Wichita, Sedgwick County Board of Commissioners, Kaufman Associates will develop a final ordinance that they're expected to deliver. We held a kickoff meeting, staff did, with Kaufman Associates on November 13th to address the scope review of the project and identify points of contact. It was kind of get to know names and faces as we work on this project. And we will have a follow-up meeting with Kaufman Associates on December 5th. Staff anticipates further discussions with the Advanced Plans Committee and the Planning Commission as the ordinance develops, with consideration by the Planning Commission, Sedgwick County Commission, and Wichita City Council during the first quarter of 2024. I think one of the schedules that I looked at kind of shows that occurring probably in February, March, and April respectively, as we plan to bring a draft ordinance to all of you. So that concludes my update on that particular item, and I'm open to any questions that you may have.
John?
How is this ordinance going to work with the federal regulations over McConnell Air Force Base and the noise zones north and south of the runways?
I know that those factors will certainly be considered. I know that Kaufman Associates is currently reviewing all of our existing practices and policies, so I'm sure they will certainly be taking a hard look at that as we develop our ordinance. So it's a good question.
I think you can encroach it.
And I'll help address some of that question. And great question. And Justin's correct. What's nice about this is that this is an opportunity to relook at and update a section of the code that hasn't been touched in decades. And what we found in discussions with the Wichita Airport Authority is that plans have changed, especially at Jabara Airport. We've seen a lot of development that's taken place out there. And the anticipated runway configuration never was constructed, never really evolved from what was anticipated. So this is an opportunity to really take a hard look at that one and make sure that our plans and policies are matching up with where the airport anticipates actually going into the future. And that includes not only runway configuration, but the types of aircraft that are being used and flown out of these airports. And John, you're right in terms of the federal regulations and in terms of what's also in our code in terms of noise. I don't anticipate any changes in those, and we will have to be compliant with what the FAA's got in place.
Because in '95, when we changed it, it originally, that noise zone stopped at Cherry Street. Now it's clear up to Kellogg.
Yeah, and this will give us a great opportunity to look at, what types of aircraft are being used at these facilities and what kind of noise is being produced, and if there are any significant changes that would impact what's in the zoning code.
All right, any other questions? I have one which may or may not be relevant at all, but how do drones fit into this and the regulation thereof? Do I even want to ask that?
I think it's a really pertinent question. I mean, especially as the popularity of drones increases. I mean, that's certainly something we can bring up with Kaufman Associates. I'm sure there are existing regulations as it applies to drones, especially personal use drones for, as Christmas is coming up,
Oh God, yes.
Or the holiday season is coming up. But yeah, that's certainly a question we can bring up with Kaufman Associates and make sure that that's something that's addressed, because the use of personal drones has certainly increased since 1995. So
they have them for little kids now, which just terrifies me.
Don't we have some kind of a regulation in the city? Because I know last summer I was at the ball game and one flew over and they stopped the game.
Oh, really? I'm not familiar with any specific language personally, but Scott may be able to speak to that.
No, I'll tell you, that's one of the great benefits of having these meetings and having these dialogues is we get questions and things that kind of come up that we need to address. And so this is one of the things that we'll take back with us. So I appreciate the comments.
All right, always glad to make more work for you guys. All right, any other questions from the committee? Yeah, I do that. Any members of the public want to comment on this item? Seeing none. All right. Thank you, Justin. I think they're finally going to let you sit down and put Scott. Item 8 on the agenda is short-term rental in the county. Scott Wadle, and our recommended action is receive and file. So.
All right. So you're getting a lot of information today. 3 of these are really being prompted by discussions that the county's been having about what's the right fit for event centers. Short-term rentals has come up for a couple of reasons. And one is because the city of Wichita, of course, amended the zoning code back in September, and the county, of course, adopted that. So we have a joint code, but those changes were only for the city of Wichita, which prompted the question about how should short-term rentals be addressed or handled in the unincorporated county. Second part of why this has come up is because through the event center's discussions, it has been discovered that there are at least two event centers operating in the county that are now offering short-term rentals. Now, those are two of the things that are really prompting this. Background on this is that short-term rentals, just as they were in the city, for the most part, are illegal in agriculture and residential districts in the unincorporated county of unincorporated Sedgwick County. So part of the questions has been, does Sedgwick County want to just adopt regulations or take an approach that's similar to what the city did? Or are there other models that are out there? And so that's what this research is about, is similar to the ones you just heard about. We contacted a number of different counties to find out how they're handling short-term rentals. And I'm going to refer you to the attachment, and I would just point out that at least in mine, we've got the cover page of the staff report, and then we've got a couple of pages, looks like they were actually for event center in the county document. But if you go a little bit further back, you'll see one that says state of the practice, short-term rentals in the unincorporated county. And in that document, on page 4, is a table that I'm just going to highlight real quick. It's got these green check marks on it. Is everyone having luck finding that one? All right, that's it. I think this one's probably the most helpful. And you can see that there are 3 counties that have specific regulations for short-term rentals. There are 4 of them that regulate them just with a conditional use, as it would for a business. 2 of them don't have any regulations, and then 1 county is in the process of adopting and looking at getting new regulations updated. In terms of the overview about what the specific counties are doing, I think the ones that are specific, one that kind of stuck out to me is you've got Wyandotte County, which they require a special use permit. And I don't know in terms of similarities on these, I think part of the takeaway is that there's different approaches that each county is employing. Although we are seeing a trend that overall, the majority of counties are addressing short-term rentals. And in some form or fashion, they are permitted, but you have to go through a process to get there. That would be the overall trend. In terms of the specific approaches about how they get there, I think each of them is unique and different. But we can see that they allow for public consideration of whether or not a short-term rental is appropriate. So with that, I'll stand for any questions.
Scott?
Yeah.
Do you know the history at all of why they were illegal in the county previously?
I think it falls under the same category as why they were illegal in the city. It's because in large part our zoning code, I believe, was trying to differentiate between residential uses like long-term residences as opposed to hotels and motels. And so it was that 7-day stay that was really causing the issue. So in this instance, they still remain largely illegal in the majority of the unincorporated county, again, in residential and agricultural districts.
Okay, Mr. Johnson?
Sorry, could you summarize the change that we made?
For the city? Yeah. So in the city, there were 2 main components. The first one was licensing. So there was a licensing program that was put in place. That was done solely by the city. It was a change to the municipal code and requires an annual license for each dwelling unit that is operated as a short-term rental. Then the second part of that was there were amendments that were made to the Unified Zoning Code. Previously, as we've discussed, short-term rentals were in violation of the Unified Zoning Code if they were occurring in residential districts and were rented for 7 days or less. So then what's happened with this recent change is that property owners now can apply for permission to have a short-term rental on their property if it's zoned residentially. Initially, that would come in as an administrative permit, and the administrative permit can be done administratively by staff, but there is a public input component in that there's not a sign that's placed on the property, but instead there are letters that go out to all of the property owners of abutting and contiguous properties. So those properties that touch or directly across the street and would touch without the street being there. If a majority of those property owners, of the owners of those properties, submit protests against the application, then that application is converted to a conditional use. And that process was included because there are approximately 500 to 600 of these operating in the city, and we didn't want to flood the system. So being able to approve those administratively and take care of the ones administratively for the ones that are not controversial was important, while also providing robust public input opportunities for those that are controversial was also important. So that's how we did that balance. I could talk for hours on that, but that's it in a nutshell.
That's fine.
All right, any other questions for Scott? All right, thank you, Scott. And again, that's a receive and file. So we will move on to item 9, advanced plans meeting day and time. And I jumped the gun. This was the suggestion that we move the advanced plans committee meeting time. I think would like to hear from anybody who wants to comment on it. Joe?
I'm in agreement with Deborah. Let's leave it like it is.
All right, and since he and I were the two that were most interested in moving it, and everyone else was at best lukewarm, I think we will just continue meeting at our Thursday morning on the same day as MAPC time. And this is different from the special meeting. This is just our date and time as opposed to the special meetings. So, all right, we will drop that topic, and I don't know, if someone wants to bring it up a year or so from now, maybe we'll talk about it then. All right, project updates.
So this is an item that we typically include on the advanced plans agenda. We typically do it once a month, so I don't have a handout for this one, but what I wanted to do is just give you some quick verbal updates. So in terms of the solar, we've covered those. Probably one point that I would make on that is that we're still in the process of finalizing a lot of the draft documents that you saw today, including the summary from the open house. We continue to look for trends out of that one. We are pulling the data from the online survey. We weren't able to have that for you today, but we will distribute those following today's meeting so that you've got that. The other thing that we're looking at are the public comments that we're receiving via email, letters, etc. So we have 3 points of data that we are collecting public comments from. Our task and our challenge, and that includes everyone on advanced plans, is to identify whether or not there are trends in terms of the comments that are coming in, and what are kind of those common items that people are mentioning that therefore probably maybe warrant a in-depth review and consideration about whether or not there should be any changes. Now, that does not preclude the county commission or members of the planning commission from looking at other items beyond those. But what we're trying to do is kind of see if there's any kind of common themes that are coming out of those. So one of the things that we're relying on you for is to look at the materials that we're providing and then tell us, you know, if you have questions or if you're getting the sentiment that we ought to be looking at specific things that are currently in the code, or maybe things that aren't included and should be, those kind of things. So that's where we're at on solar. So, and that's moving quite quickly, and we're just working on getting those materials out to you, and we'll continue to get those distributed to you. And for the members of the public who are in attendance, the materials that we distribute, we will also post those online so everyone's got equal opportunity and access to those. In terms of short-term rentals, the county adopted the amendments for that pertain to the city. As I mentioned, now we continue to work on implementation for the city, and this includes a couple of different things. Number one is getting a license application that is up and functioning, and we've got that now. The second part is getting the monitoring service. There's companies that provide artificial intelligence monitoring services. We've got a contract with one, and we're getting them the data to begin that service. Because as you notice, it's been relatively quiet in terms of zone changes for short-term rentals. Likewise, it has also been relatively quiet for the license applications. So we know that a number of them will be in violation when the 6-month and 12-month grace periods expire. And so getting this monitoring service up and running is important for us, because we want to be able to provide them with notices to let them know that they are in violation and that they've got a window in which to get into compliance. So yeah.
Scott, I live in Delano and had a short-term rental across the street in front of me and another one across the alley behind me. And the one in front of me, for whatever it's worth, has been sold as a private residence. And I talked to the owner, and it was their opinion that the market was overbuilt in short-term rentals. And partly because they knew the regulations were coming, they decided they would just get out of the business. So I don't know whether that's going to affect things. So maybe your workload won't be quite as impossible as you thought it might be.
You know, it's interesting to get the anecdotal report, because what we're seeing is articles across the nation that have been mentioning that oversaturation of the market and how there's been a reduction in the number of overall units being offered as short-term rentals. So I don't have any evidence beyond the anecdotal that it's happening here in Wichita, but I certainly would believe it based on national reports. Let's see, that was short-term rentals. College Hill plan. Justin and the advanced plans team are working on putting together the first steering committee meeting for that. It's taken some time just in terms of getting an application process for steering committee members, then also deliberations and then appointments. The appointments were made by the council last week, I believe. It was quite a long meeting, and at the end of that, there was appointments that were made. So we're very excited to get that process kicked off. Nightclub in the city, you'll be seeing that one later on today at the MAPC meeting. Places for people, we continue to just be on the lookout for implementation actions there. Public notification, we've had some really good dialogue on that one at the advanced plans meetings. We're currently in conversations with legal on the inclusion of Spanish and Vietnamese languages, and if that's appropriate, and if so, how best to do that. And it's a relatively simple thing, but it's a complex conversation because there are a lot of potential implications that come from that in terms of, if you do provide those languages, how much content do you provide? Do you refer them to somewhere else? How do you assist them if there's verbal? And does it open us up for any concerns about what if the information is inaccurate, and how do we address that? So rather complex questions that have come up from that, and it's been a really good dialogue. And then Old Town, we can actually take that one off the list. That was wrapped up with the tattoo. So that's a brief overview, and we'll have a more in-depth update for you at the next meeting. So I'll
Thank
stand
you,
for any
Scott.
questions.
Any questions for Scott on any of that? All right, thank you. All right, item 11 on our agenda, public comments. Do any of our visitors, members of the public here, want to speak on anything to us? All right, please come up to the microphone, give us your name and address, and you have 3 minutes, please.
Hello, my name is Jack Patton. I live at 337 South Rutan, Wichita, Kansas. Just a couple of comments of concerns from the neighborhood, my particular neighborhood, and myself, is on the short-term rentals, concern about density. Notice Wyandotte has one facing item business per block. Live in the College Hill district, and that's, you know, where it's kind of a concern that it's just going to be a row and row of Airbnbs, but hopefully Airbnb is tapering down a little bit. The dilution of the notification system. I know some people say it's none of our business if I live down the street, but it's down the street, so it kind of is my business. So the restriction and additional limitations on public notification is somewhat of a concern. The biggest concern we have is the city's history of lack of follow through and enforcement on something like this. You can have all these regulations, and if there's no follow through on the backswing, it really doesn't do a whole lot of good. Sometimes the city, people aren't mad at the city for what they do, it's for what they don't do, which is do what they say they're going to do. Another big thing is the noise and party house regulations that are, beyond the scope here. But frankly, it took somebody getting killed for this item to be brought to the forefront. And it's speaking to the College Hill plan, based on some of the aggressive tactics that commercial entities have taken. I'm almost in favor of having every neighborhood having a overview plan to kind of control what's going on so that people just come out and wipe out a bunch of houses because, oh, it's just across the street, or we've already torn the houses down. Too bad. So that's my take on it. And thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the speaker? All right, thank you, sir. Any other members of the public here in chambers who would like to speak on anything? Okay, in that case, our next meeting is Thursday, December 14th at 10 a.m. right here. And if there are, whoops, Scott wants to say something.
It's just a small announcement. Tonight at 5 o'clock, I believe is when it starts. There's students from K-State that have been working on, well, gosh, I think just different scenarios and ideas about the medical campus downtown. And so they will be presenting those and available for questions and discussions down at downtown Wichita later on this evening.
And if y'all have not been down in that neighborhood lately, it's kind of amazing, all the stuff going on. All right, any other issues that any new business anyone needs to bring up? All right, meeting adjourned.